Military planes and helicopters circled the Welsh village of Pentyrch for 3 days straight in February 2016. They never left. They never landed on the ground. They never sent any notice to the town officials as required by law to what brought them there. Citizens of Pentyrch demanded to know what was going on above them in the night sky, with all the lights, low-flying planes, strange circling for those 3 days straight. Police answered dozens of calls and complaints involving planes flying so low it vibrated cupboards, caused pictures hanging on the wall to fall and break, and even windows crack. Police did not have an official answer to give, but speculated it must be some sort of a military training operation. Kaz Clark and her friends stood outside each night looking up at the skies as dozens of military giant planes and fully equipped helicopters circled suspiciously up above their houses. Still no answers until the night of February 26, 2016, when Kaz Clark and her friend seen it firsthand when a giant black pyramid-shaped craft appeared out of nowhere. Not just any little craft. This pyramid was over 30 stories tall, fully materializing in a matter of 30 seconds, and which got the full attention of all the military planes in the area. The military was not surprised. They had been plotting, planning. This was an ambush for whatever it was that seemed to tear through the fabric piercing the night sky. Join us tonight as we explore and uncover what I believe is really one of the best documented cases of a UFO or UAP.
From a child born into this world, we are taught what to believe. Closed-minded we become, fearful to be deceived. Still we desire to know what lies beyond that locked door. The art of the storyteller, conjuring tales of legend and lore. History hidden, lost knowledge, things forgotten and the unknown. These are the things that direct us and will set the tone. Welcome, friends, to another episode of Nightmares on the Lost Highway.
Well, I was telling Eric before we recorded, when I first started doing my research, again, Eric watches videos and I read articles. We research in two entirely different ways.
Seems to work for us.
And so, yeah, I think we find information the other one doesn't find, and we complement each other, I hope.
Got to build off of each other for that.
You know, the first 2 or 3 I found were very, very sparse. And I thought, well, this is just punishment for some of the ones that I've picked where it was not very much. Of course, you know, if you go back and you look at the ones, the Van Meter Visitor, there wasn't much to that, just a couple of days. And then I think the Infield Horror, just a couple of days.
Yep.
And so when I started, I literally found just a few little snippets about the night of February 26th, one person's experience. And I thought, man, if this is all there is to this story.
Eric got me good.
And then it was, you know, the 4th or 5th site I found that I started reading through. And this page just kept going and scrolling and scrolling. And I found more and more as I went through. This was a really interesting story and a potentially Roswell-esque type experience.
And really not that long ago, 2016.
No, 2016. That's what I was going to say. I mean, this was 2016. And, you know, like Eric said, you know, February 26, 2016. But the story starts on the 23rd. He talked about Kaz Clark. She's 57 from the village of Pentyrch, Wales. She said that the incident wasn't a surprise to the people in charge. She was quoted as saying, the military knew they were coming and had a spotter plane in the air for 2 days waiting for the event. So this is something the military had an idea this was going to happen.
Obviously, yes.
And again, this is in England, so you know, not an American military who, you know, who knows what they're getting involved in and responsible for. But yeah, this is again, this started on the 23rd. So,
3-day, 3-night event, basically above the small little village of Pentyrch in Wales.
And it didn't end. The 26th. It happened in the early morning hours of the 26th. The event essentially continued throughout that whole day.
Yes.
And then even after that, you know, there were still things coming up, and
there was aftermath for
at
least 5 years afterwards on like radiation readings and different things like that. Well, let me kind of get us started. Witness Kaz Clark, we've talked a lot about her. She's kind of the primary witness that I at least kind of kept coming up with. She came forward, I guess.
She's worked with the she's worked with UFO investigator Gary something, and we'll bring up his name later. I don't want to. He comes up later in the story. I believe she's published at least one book with him about this topic, which has come out recently. And I think she's been interviewed multiple times. She's been interviewed on TV. I think there's a YouTube video.
She's pretty outspoken about it, too.
She doesn't back away from the experience. She 100% says that she saw something.
Well, she come forward probably, we're going to say predominantly over all the other witnesses, at least in the accounts that I came with. But another, I think, really cool thing about this was the majority, at least, of the witnesses all kind of shared the same descriptions. And again, this all happened on one night. So like the following morning, these stories starts rolling in. But here's Kaz Clark's personal account. She had her friend out, Dave, was over at her house, I guess, that night. And it had become so typical at this point in time, the third night, that she joked and said it's kind of like a backstage theater. We just kind of get together and look up at the sky and watch what's going to go on tonight.
Well, yeah, starting on the 23rd, there was a small plane, a propeller plane at first, just a small twin engine that would circle basically over the field behind hers and Dave's houses. They were neighbors. And then for that entire time, the sky was never empty. Like that plane would fly, I guess, until it needed to land. And before it would leave, another one would fly in to take its place.
Yes.
And this went on for 3 days straight. So yeah, there was always a plane in the air for these 3 days. It was later discovered that the whole of Welsh airspace was closed to all air traffic on the night of the 25th through the early morning of the 26th, so the day of the event. But on the night of the 25th, prior to this experience, an E3 Sentry, this is one of those big... I think they call them AWACS planes, but they got the dome on the top that spins around with all the sensor gear. A recon
for,
plane.
Tracking and
It arrived early in the night on the 25th, and it circled over the field multiple times, and then into the early morning hours of the 26th. And that was when the incident took place, and I think Eric has that.
Well, according to Kaz Clark and her neighbor friend Dave, basically, by this time, the third night of the incidents of all the activity overhead, she joked and said it was kind of like a backyard theater event, that neighbors would just kind of pull their lawn chairs around and stare up at the sky and see what all was going to happen that night. Because, again, this constant airplane traffic, helicopter, Apache helicopters, all kinds of stuff going on, just crazy. But she said it kind of climaxed when this giant 30-story tall, black-looking pyramid with lights. And at different points in the story, it does say that lights would light up on one side. It fired out lights and different things. But she said what was so strange about this was it did not fly in. It did not hover down from the sky. She described it that it more so materialized directly overhead.
The way I saw it phrased, it emerged as if through a tear in space.
Yes, I saw that.
So I thought that was like, this is an extra dimensional thing. Is that some sort of cloaking?
Not your
I would think extra dimensional
encounter.
Yeah.
Witnesses state at first a single point of the pyramid, to Bill's point, just kind of pierced or penetrated the night sky, and then it did not seem to follow any logic or presumed positioning, meaning this giant pyramid didn't have a flat surface like where the pyramid in Giza would be, on the ground. It flew even at an angle.
Yeah.
It didn't apply to any rules.
Well, and the description I read was that there were like lights that sort of marked the edges of it. So like that was clearly seen. You had this triangle shaped lights,
corner points, and a few lights in between,
and it would move, it would turn, it would rotate.
This thing was enormous. Again, 30 stories tall was guesstimated, and about 1,000 foot on each side. Now that is bigger in scale than the giant pyramid, the Great Pyramid of Giza, and something that large, that massive, really should make some kind of a sound to be suspended there in air. But there was nothing, no wind, no turbines, no hum, no vibration, utter silence. Now, Dave reached over and grabbed Kaz's arms as this thing fully materialized, and it just kind of suspended, cocked kind of sideways, and then it starts to move. but it didn't even fly straight. Instead, one witness described it as a giant pendulum of a clock about the size of a skyscraper swinging left to right, right to left. Now, Dave wanted to get closer, but Kaz kind of pulled him back, and she explained, "We don't know what this is, and we need to get some distance away from it." So they retreated to the safety of her backyard, and there they could still get a very good view across the countryside, and again, of all these military planes now flying in and around like a nest of hornets around this pyramid when it appeared.
Yeah, it's about this time that E3 Sentry came back, and I believe there were a couple other aircraft with it. Witnesses kind of defer on what they were, but I think some witnesses said the other were U.S. military aircraft.
There was some, I believe they're called C-17s, giant tank carriers. And these things were like 170-foot long planes or something.
That's the C-130.
C-130
Hercules. That's
okay.
a transport plane. But no, there were some like military fighter jets in some of the stories I heard.
There was definitely some Apache helicopters. I've got one story that we'll get into a little bit later with that. So yeah, there was definitely kind of at least a feeling of a military presence. Now at this point, Kaz and Dave stated it was about 200 foot off the ground, hovering above some treetops. Then the temperature dropped drastically in a moment of seconds with a strange white snow-like material that now began to fall in the area. Now, it was 5 degrees Celsius in only 3 seconds, but that is 41 degrees Fahrenheit to put that in perspective. Kaz and Dave said they could immediately just see their breath. It was like they stepped into a walk-in freezer unit. And the fact, this was fact-checked, I should say, by the meteorology department. And sure enough, at that precise time when they said the pyramid fully appeared, they did register the temperature dropped 5 degrees Celsius. Now, pyramid suddenly lit up with these bright white lights. It said 6 in perfect unison. And to Bill's point, we were talking, the corners of the pyramid were lit up, and it seemed like in between the different lines, there would be some lights that would appear at different times, and it kind of changed. But with the lighting of one side, Dave in particular was expecting, he said, to see more of a polished, smooth black surface. But instead, with the light, it actually showed it was very rough, like being carved with lots of super detail, but more on something that looked like stone or rock. So I thought that was very interesting. It then fired a green light from the top peak, which glowed very brightly to the point they had to cover their eyes. And it began to circle the pyramid almost as if it was angry or on alert. Now, with the super bright green light now zipping back and forth around the pyramid for several miles, the pyramid ejected a type of a lightning energy beam from beneath it on one of the corners. And they said that it wasn't like a natural storm lightning. It was much thicker, much denser. And each sparkling vein of this lightning would last maybe 30 to 45 seconds as it just kind of echoed across the surface, across some of the trees, across the ground. And Dave in particular thought it was almost like it was looking, probing something on the ground or possibly beneath the ground.
I think at one point, Kaz says she felt compelled to wave at the craft and like it had scanned her.
Oh, wow.
So she didn't know why she did it, but she just sort of raised her hand and waved, and it didn't see anything, but it felt like she was being scanned. So it may have been part of that deal too.
Now, at this point, I have in my story, there were 4 giant, what was identified in the story I read, C-17 tank carrier planes. I think you had a different name for them.
I didn't read anything about C-17. I read about C-130s, which is a common transport plane. It's really big. I think it has 4 propellers. I mean,
it sounds similar.
It's a transport plane. So we're relying on eyewitnesses. Maybe they didn't know what they were looking at.
Look close enough to one
something
to
along
another.
those lines.
But 4 of these giant planes flew in from the west. They were basically wing to wing. There was 2 in the front, 2 in the back. They said each one of these planes was a length of 174 feet and designed to carry multiple tanks like onto a battlefront. Now, this type of a plane is not normally used a lot in practices. much less 4 of them, due to their sheer size and the cost it takes to fire them up and just get them up in the air. These things are gigantic. And again, why would you have 4 of these? Might be able to kind of look over and say, okay, well, we had 1, but no, there were documented 4 of them that flew in together. They were circling the area the entire time for the 3 days, but for whatever reason, with this pyramid basically materializing, it called all 4 of them in at one time. There was definitely formation, they said. Several people were on the ground that had military experience, past veterans and such, and said everything that they saw really led them to believe that it was definitely military training of some sort. Now, the green light began to flash even brighter with these giant planes approaching in a way that a lot of people said it was almost like trying to communicate to the planes to follow it.
I think at a certain point, there were colored orbs separate from the pyramid. At one point, it even ejected an orb like a...
Reds and greens, like the size of a barrel or something. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they even said they were barrel-shaped.
Now, so the pyramid, this giant 30-story pyramid, black stone carved, whatever, flashing lights, shooting green lights out of the top, it now begins to fade away. Now, you heard me correct. Not fly away, not drift away. It faded away. Kind of like that photo of Michael J. Fox's family in Back to the Future, where his brother and sister simply begin to fade out of the scene directly in front of you. Well, some speculated this black pyramid.
Well, hold up now, Grandpa.
Some
of our listeners may not be familiar with Back to the Future.
Back to the Future, it's a classic cult classic.
But no, I know what you mean.
Yeah. Watch it. You know who I'm talking to. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Back to the Future, you need to watch it.
I shouldn't have made fun of you. I mean, again, I know exactly what you're talking about.
I felt that was the best way to describe it.
It does work.
Yeah. And again, it disappears in a matter of about 30 seconds, the same time it took to appear, and vanished in total view with the last of the bright lights just kind of fading into darkness across that town of Pentyrch. Now, Bill had mentioned basically just before that pyramid totally vanished, it fired off what was called dozens of barrel-sized glowing lights, some red, some green, and they immediately kind of sprang to life and started darting across the countryside at high speeds. In this new darkness, with the pyramid now basically disappeared with all the lighting, these barrel-sized glowing lights were quite easy to kind of spot. There were dozens of them, they said. 2 red barrels of light said to have stopped basically right where Kaz and Dave were at in the backyard at a distance. It was like they just kind of were rotating, checking the area. They saw the 2 of them, said they almost turned to face Kaz and Dave, and then they both charged, was the words that was used, closing the gap within about 30 foot away from them. One of the red glowing barrels basically seemed to approach them even closer and got within 10 feet, while the green one kind of held back a little bit as if maybe it was in charge or maybe it was guarding being interrupted for the red glowing barrel to do whatever it was going to do. And that's when the probing light burst started that Kaz was talking about. And they both mentioned, again, there had been this dramatic temperature drop, but they described it when this scanning was going on of them, that the cold didn't seem to come from the outside or the air. It wasn't like a winter cold, which Wales knows what winter cold is, but it was more, she said, Kaz, it says that her bones were frigid, like it was coming from her body going outward. So I thought that was kind of a weird twist and interesting. At this point, they felt only a few moments had passed, but they said they both felt paralyzed, but maybe not in the strictest version. It was almost like someone or something was gripping their feet and their calves so that they could not walk, and gradually their bodies did start to get where they couldn't move, to a point where they finally, all they could do is move their eyes until the scanning was complete. And at that point, apparently, they sensed, hey, these people or whatever aren't here to hurt us. We've got other things to do. And they zipped off and left them. And so Kaz and Dave decided we've had enough for tonight. This theater gave us way more than we anticipated, and they decided to head home for the evening.
So this was all after 2 o'clock in the morning on the 26th. And the time span here, not exactly sure how long that continued, but this all starts around 2 a.m. So as these orbs speed off, a green orb in particular heads off into the west, into the direction of the nearby town of Lantrasant. I may get that name wrong, but that's how it's spelled.
I'm not going to argue.
Lantrasant. Now, the residents of Lantrasant said they were disturbed by the sounds of military helicopters above their town in the hours between 2 and 4 in the morning that day. One person complained to the police, "What's going on in Lantrasant? Something definitely woke me up, and now there's a crap load of helicopters circling outside." I had to censor myself there.
That's a scientific measure, kids.
Yeah. Now, these helicopters were seen to land on the local common, and the landings and commotion lasted for many hours. One witness even reported seeing a large double-rotor Chinook military helicopter in the area, and those are big, giant cargo helicopters. You have the ones that are solid-bodied, and then there's the ones that are kind of hollow in the middle so they can pick things up. So, but they said this helicopter was flying low, saying one resident said it passed just right over her chimney, and many residents reported bright lights shining down from the sky into their homes. One resident in particular said they tried to identify the helicopters, but due to the altitude and the cloud cover in the area, they said they really couldn't make an exact ID. This person must have been a little more knowledgeable. They said they didn't hear anything they thought sounded like a Chinook, but they did believe that they had seen and heard something resembling a U.S. Black Hawk. So,
that's
military
pretty specific for sounds, yeah.
Many also reported seeing multiple military vehicles on the ground. And then as the night progressed later on, many in the area reported 2 explosion-like sounds so loud that they caused their houses to shake.
Yes.
One of the explosions was even documented on a seismograph located 40 miles away. So there is some evidence that the ground shook.
It even caused some power outages, like at the local hospital and stuff.
Well, speaking of the local hospital, a nurse at Royal Glamorgan Hospital said she also heard an explosion just after 2 in the morning and heard a second explosion a short time afterward that sounded like it was even further away. When she went outside after the explosion, she said the air was thick with the smell of sulfur, which is apparently fairly common in UFO encounters. And said also almost all of the patients of the hospital complained of a thick black smoke that came in through the vents and windows of the building that night, and the multiple car alarms that were going off, not just in the parking lot of the hospital, but in the streets around. So obviously it shook with enough force to trigger car alarms.
I think I read somewhere where seismic graphs picked it up over 40 miles away, that, it was a substantial spike. So,
now that nurse said that she would later doubt that the official military story, which we'll get into a little bit later, due to the fact that all the local roads had been closed that night. Since they're such a small village and they have such a small police force, in order to close all the roads in and out in that area, it would have required bringing in people from out of town to conduct that. So it wasn't just isolated to a small local incident. The road closings were verified by multiple social media posts. And that, of course, that's another reason why the locals believe that the authorities had prior knowledge of this incident. Residents in the area were concerned that their children and livestock might be in danger, with some unknown military-worthy threat in the region.
Oh, yeah. What are they exposing the kids and themselves to? Now, you mentioned children. There was a lot of things that was going on that night. I kind of addressed Kaz and Dave. Bill and I kind of talked about that. He's addressed a few more things with these 2 large explosions, some problems at a hospital. But a lot of the parents the following day came forward with their own kind of weirder concerns over everything else that we've already talked about. And that was the fact that supposedly every child in the town slept through all of this without ever wakening or being disturbed.
To be fair, I could sleep through a tornado. I don't think it would be odd for the kids to sleep through, maybe.
Well,
it depends.
I was on the same page of the book you're reading, and I'm like, okay, well, kids slept good. That's great. Some of the parents said they could not wake their kids.
Okay,
like they were under a trance or something, to the point one of the children's mothers, I believe it was some type of a nurse, an RN, said she could not get a pulse. So they raced children to this hospital, who was struggling to keep the power and the lights on because of the explosions. and they brought in dozens of children that they could not awaken.
Oh, I didn't find that.
And it's like, what kind of weird, twisted event is this? So that was a very strange one. One parent said, my gosh, she goes, the best thing that ever happened. She goes, my kid hasn't slept through a night in 10 years. And just all of a sudden, every kid supposedly slept through. Now, back to Kaz. Many other local witness reports starts coming in. Well, she wakes up the next morning, having had quite the night herself. She goes to the bathroom, splashes some water on her face, and she says she looks up in the mirror from the sink and was startled to see someone staring back at her. It was her, but overnight her entire head of hair had turned nearly solid white.
Now, I do like that detail, and I found that as well. But
go ahead.
When I was in high school, we watched a lot of scary movies. As you know, the common trope in scary movies is you see something so frightening,
scares the life out of
turns
you.
your hair white.
Yes.
My friend made a point of asking in our biology class if that was possible. My biology teacher in high school had taught at a college level, and then taught high school preparatory, like college level prep, college prep.
Right.
He basically just laughed. There is nothing in this world that can have a psychological impact on you, just make your hair turn white. And even if your hair was going to turn white, it doesn't happen overnight. I've been working on this glorious head of white hair since I was 18 years old. So, and she was 57.
She was 57.
She was an older lady.
And I kind of thought the same thing. Now, I'm glad you did say the exact year of how old she was, because I did not find the exact. I just found kind of some ballpark. Yeah. But I did find it very interesting that with some of the pictures, it showed a picture of her the day before and a picture of her walking to the site afterwards. And there was a very noticeable difference of her hair color.
I didn't see a before and after, so I didn't get that.
In critiquing myself here, it was a black and white photo. So again, with the sun maybe shining on, it could have played tricks, but it was too good of a detail to omit out of the story. Now, as we continue on, people started noticing other weird things. Now, one thing about Pentyrch, there was an area called the Commons. For lack of a better term, it was just kind of a form of a dumping ground for old bicycles, tires, oversized appliances, refrigerators, that type of stuff. The people that lived amongst the Commons in that area woke up that morning to a pleasant surprise. Everything was neatly cleaned up. The streets were all swept. All the debris was picked up. Appliances were stacked one on top of another rather than being, just kind of spread out for everybody to see. Aluminum was sorted in aluminum. Steel was sorted in steel. Copper was sorted in copper. Wiring was put together. And they're like, this occurred in the night hours. We're not sure why, but hey, we're happy. It looks a lot better.
A small army of obsessive compulsives came in. You and I have talked before. When you had the business with the cards, and I told you, like, I would just come in and sort them for you for free.
Right.
I like to organize things like that.
It drives me nuts that they're not organized.
Oh, you have no idea.
Well, another local citizen said he was out walking his dog at about 4:45 a.m. that morning, and he reported, to Bill's point, several military aircraft, in particularly an Apache helicopter, landing nearby, and witnessed fully armed military dressed soldiers propel down off of ropes out of them into the forest.
Well, I thought you were going to tell another story. That I found another anecdote about an Apache that apparently made an emergency landing with its cockpit on fire.
Yes.
And later on, the military would say that was the seismic reading that was picked up. Yeah, throughout the night after the explosions, I guess military planes were seen flying back and forth from two different locations as if maybe transporting something. So, the first explosion was an explosion. The second explosion has the seismic report with it. And so kind of the belief there is the first explosion was them shooting the craft. The second explosion was the craft crash landing.
Okay.
So,
and I found it's interesting you use crash landing because that term was used a lot, but then I have other people that said nothing ever crashed per se.
Well, I don't know if you found it. I definitely found references to a crash site.
Okay. Well, this is good. And this is why we do different sources for our materials. But another thing they thought was strange was just people as they were heading into town. And I'm envisioning this. I mean, obviously, this would be the talk of the town. You got everybody getting coffee and stuff at the local cafe or whatever and telling their stories. They said as they were making their way to town, there was like this caution tape, like police would use in investigations, but said it was just randomly tied to a branch here, a branch there. There was no designed area, and it looked like it had been done for months. And this was just kind of the shards that was left that survived. And obviously it wasn't there the night before. So that was totally out of place.
Well, the next morning, of course, people took to social media. That's what you do in the 2020s and 20-teens. You get to social media, you start, hey, did somebody else see this? Apparently, Kaz posted online about her experience that morning, and she was contacted almost immediately by a mysterious unknown individual asking her what she had seen, who she had spoken to, and how she had communicated that information. I guess she did agree to meet with this person. She can go into a lot of detail about that, but recalls that it was a strange meeting. And she was asked directly if she was worried about what might happen to her and members of her family.
Ooh.
And she said she was threatened with being involved in a fatal car accident.
The Welsh division of the Men in Black.
Well, that same morning, there was an article on Wales Online, which I found and looked at, that stated that this had all been part of a military drill. I think they called it Exercise Chameleon or something.
Yes. Yep.
And it was a joint effort between the British Army and the RAF, the Royal Air Force. And so that explained the aircraft, that explained military presence. But here's the thing. Exercise Chameleon happened 1 week prior to this day.
Not in this area either, but in the vicinity, but further away.
Yeah, it was quite a distance away. And of course, as the next morning happens and people saw where the orbs went and whatnot, I guess Kaz decided she was going to go investigate this where maybe something had crashed.
Maybe the crash site, yeah.
And that's I guess that's where investigator Gary Jones comes in. And he was part of this. But they went to a place called Smilog Woods, which sounds like it should be in Dungeons and Dragons.
There's that Dungeons and Dragons reference.
So, but do you have a lot on the crash site?
I will pick up there where I was talking about the dog walker. Now, they said that he saw this Apache helicopter flying over. He saw soldiers dressed as military, fully armed, propelling out of the helicopters down into these woods. He said, I kept hearing one voice repeatedly. And now he's hidden behind some bushes with his dog. I'm sure is like, doggy, keep your mouth shut. You're going to blow our cover. But he said, I kept hearing this same voice over and over. Find it now. It has to be here. Something to that degree. Yeah. And he said they did have metal detectors, and they were like scanning the ground for possibly something that got dropped, got left from the crash site or that fell from the craft.
Well, so there in Smilog Woods later on, when Cavs and Gary would go investigate, they found trees as tall as 40 feet that had been snapped, as if something had just shot through them.
And I don't think it was at the ground level. They were snapped up like at 20 foot tall or something like that.
And it was in a way as if something was descending. So some of them were at the top, and then as you got closer to the ground, and then they found an area where the vegetation had been all scorched and destroyed, and where the ground had been scraped up as if something, of course, had hit the ground there. There were strange white burn marks on the trees, and there was an extremely pungent smell all around, possibly indicating where one of the smaller craft may have crashed. Some reports also reference a mysterious foam or some sort of pseudo-snow at the site, which I think you touched on. Now, some suggest that this might be a silica-rich particulate, which is commonly reported in other UFO incidents.
One thing I did read about that is they said when they would catch a snowflake in your hand, it wouldn't melt, meaning it wouldn't leave any water, but it would just like fade away, like that pyramid did, and it wouldn't leave any residue or anything. So it was unlike snow, but looked like snow.
Well, Clark filmed the site that morning, and Gary Jones measured the electromagnetic field levels. In his words, the safe range of EMF is about 0.2 to 0.4. But after that night, the levels have been as high as 1.2, over 3 times the safety strength, even up until the 5th year anniversary.
Yeah. At least up to the 5 years later.
Later on, a military presence would move into the area, camping out in the fields where the incident took place and giving two different presumed fake stories as to why they were there and what they were doing.
Put that in perspective, that was directly behind Kaz's and Dave's house.
Witnesses to their activity, this military presence said that when someone walked by, they would all halt, turn and watch the individual until they had passed out of sight.
Yeah, just totally stop whatever you're doing. Yeah. Just look normal, look normal.
They described it as very cult-like. Other witnesses said that at one point they saw these people conducting what they called a fingertip search of the area below where the craft was seen. I assume this means, they were literally combing through the grass with their bare hands.
Now, Kaz goes on and she talks about as they're walking past this encampment that has appeared overnight, she says, these weren't military tents. They looked like civilian tents. They were different colors and stuff.
Well, and I think they said a lot of them were in white uniforms.
Yes, some of them had like the full-blown Kim outfits with full masks and everything. But she made a kind of a smart aleck comment that kind of got her some attention from the media. And that was, she said, I've always said you can take the man out of the military, but you can't take the military out of the man.
I'll stand by that based on my experience.
And she said the way these tents were, it was perfectly in line. There were like, for lack of a better term, roads pass in betweens. There were squared off sections. She said it was almost like it was a facade to make it look like a bunch of commoners just kind of came together, flocked out here to see what was going on. But she goes, there was definitely military training. She said some of them she noticed was like even had assault rifles and the full blown, and said as her and Dave and another friend from the neighborhood, Donna, was making their way over there, they walked past it and several people politely approached them and, like, hey, what are you doing here? What do you need? And this is where they throw out two stories. And you touched on this. We've already got, it's a military training exercise, so that one they've already kind of played.
That's the official story.
Then one of these people out of this camp tells them, we're part of a fracking research team. And we're here, fracking is where they basically inject water and pressures under the ground. They find oil and natural gases. And they said, so, you need to stay back for your own safety, kind of deal. Well, again, these are commoners. Kaz and Dave and them grew up around this area. Fracking is illegal in that section of South Wales. So that story didn't get any sticking on the wall.
I would assume you wouldn't do it in a residential area,
You would like to think they wouldn't. So then, like a few hours go by, and I guess, I don't know if it was Kaz and them again or somebody else went to them, and the same camp, a guy come out, and he portrays himself as being a member of a local telephone company. And they're out here looking for future spots for cell phone towers. And to that question, it was, well, then why do you need full facial masks, your white marshmallow outfits, military assault rifles? Nope, sorry, you got it wrong again. So they're just throwing out stuff, just randomly hoping that something sticks to the wall. I thought it was crazy. More facts continued to arise in that day after the event. Witnesses' stories started rolling in. We had newspapers and stuff that were starting to saying that they were going to do articles, many of which never materialized. Even Online Wales, who Bill mentioned Kaz had spoken to or had reached out to, promised basically we're going to be doing a full-blown spread on this, and it never took place.
Well, and again, the article is still there, and it's just a couple of paragraphs,
pretty vague,
just 3 or 4 lines, and just there was a military exercise. That's why you saw the helicopters.
Now, there was one individual that actually worked at the local airport, and they came forward saying that this Apache helicopter had made several trips in and out of the crash site until one of the large explosions, the first one, which we had briefly touched upon, caused the Apache to make an emergency landing at said airport. And they showed pictures. This thing was fully engulfed with flames. We're not talking a little bit of smoke coming out of the cockpit. There were flames like 6 foot tall coming out of the cockpit. This same individual who worked at the airport brought up that the BAE-17, which is an elite plane with a call sign of Kitty Hawk, had landed for a very short period of time on the airstrip, and then in a matter of about 30 minutes took off again.
I'm no military expert, but a plane with the call sign Kitty Hawk.
That,
again, sounds like that would be an American plane.
Well, it was not. This was a European plane, and actually it is used for high-level dignitaries like the Prime Minister or the royal family. That's the only time it flies. Why was it there in the middle of the night at 3 a.m. and left by 4 a.m.? We may never know. You had mentioned the exercise Chameleon. That kind of stuck, and when you did a quick search, yeah, there was a military practice of that, but to Bill's point, that took place a week or 2 weeks prior and not in the direct area.
Well, yeah, that's been the official excuse was Exercise Chameleon, which is a biannual training drill between the British Army and the RAF. Like I said earlier, it's completely normal exercise. The locals are familiar with it. And during that particular exercise, it's very common for there to be low-altitude helicopter and C-130 operations, parachute drops, flare simulations,
metal detectors, full-blown outfits.
Yeah. But again, according to Kaz, Exercise Chameleon had happened the week before. Like, they were familiar with it. They knew when it happened. And it took place in Durham, which is 300 miles from Lantrasant.
I knew it was a substantial distance away. Now, this same witness who worked at the airport, again, you would think, does this for a living, kind of would be a pretty viable source. He's told us about the royal family private plane, the Apache helicopter that made the emergency landing. So that's pretty factual. He goes on to say, because he's been in the military, there was another strange plane that landed and was in the sky that night that he felt was worth bringing up. There was an E-3 Sentry aircraft. I think Bill had mentioned that, and it can track up to 250 aircrafts with pinpoint accuracy up to 250 miles away.
That's a high-level surveillance aircraft. That's its only job.
That's its primary job. But there was also a Hawker Beechcraft Shadow R1. It went under the call sign of Snake 48. Okay. It had been retired, if you will, 2 years ago. There were rumors that it had been retrofitted with devices for sensitive tracking purposes, listening, and finding. So they believe it was there to find whatever it was that everybody else seemed to be searching for. But here, this thing just it was a retired plane. They did some retrofitting. It was kept hush-hush. Boom. It appears here on the theater stage for the 3 nights as well. So, and again, that was from a person that I was told worked at the airport there. A lot of stuff doesn't add up, Bill. A lot of stuff doesn't add up. To use the word chaos, I think would be very fitting in the following day after this event. At least a 25-mile radius was closed down. Highways were shut down. No one was allowed in and out without proper authority. Even a nearby national park, a popular camping wilderness area, was closed down. That itself is not normal. National parks normally don't close overnight without some form of a planning and, notice in advance and all of this. But campers who were camping that night in the park said they were obviously also witnesses to what was going on in the night sky, and said they were forcefully removed from their campsites the next morning at about 5:30 a.m. with heavily armed military soldiers who escorted them off the premises. They were also illegally detained, illegally searched, and all of their cell phones were taken, wiped, and then returned to them the next day. I've never heard of the military even being kind enough to give you back anything that they take from you, much less clean it. But in this purpose, to say that they wiped their cell phones, they took off every picture, every audible file, anything whatsoever that could have been on there, and then returned them after they detained them for about 48 hours.
Wow.
Now, when they contacted the national park, because citizens demanded to know what was going on, national park's like, we didn't close down the park. What are you talking about? Again, nothing makes sense.
And I found a lot of references like that where like they would contact the local police. We didn't shut the roads down.
Yeah.
They would contact, well, what about this or what about that? We didn't do that. We had nothing to do with that, So
now, one of the deals on the highways being shut down, they said there was a tanker truck that had overturned. That was one little short-lived story. And they said you don't shut down a 25-mile radius for a tanker truck normally.
I mean, if you were going to do that, then it would be very serious and you would evacuate the area.
Evacuate the people inside, not don't allow them to escape. So,
well, Kaz, of course, has been trying to figure out what happened that night ever since. She's contacted the Ministry of Defense, and they told her this incident was covered under Section 26 and defined as not in the public interest.
Oh, it's very much in the public interest.
There is a copy of that particular response online, and it is, I mean, what you'd expect from a government correspondence, just saying, basically, we don't have any record of anything strange happening that night, but what did happen that night is not in the public interest. Well, if nothing happened, then just leave it at that. When you tack on not in the public interest, it leads you to believe something happened.
There was something that definitely happened.
And in the years since, witnesses have come forth from Bethwis and Port Talbot reporting they had seen barrel-shaped objects in the sky that same night. Now, Kaz continues to believe in the extraterrestrial origin of her experience even to this very day. She's passed multiple polygraph tests with results indicating truthful, no deception detected.
At some point, one of the witnesses brought in some red shards of crystal glass that they thought would have been possibly taken from a crash site of one of these barrel lights. They said they did take some radiation readings. It was off the chart. They didn't actually give a number, but they said it was very unsafe, off the chart. Those have now since vanished. There was literally like men in black that came in that said they wanted to do some studies on a few pieces of the shards. And by the time they left, there were no shards to be left at the town hall. So they had that as well.
Well, that night, hundreds of people called the police to complain about helicopters over their homes. Hundreds of people heard and experienced multiple explosions. Multiple witnesses complained about aircraft noise ranging up to 50 miles away from the area. Multiple witnesses claimed to see objects in the sky pursued by military aircraft. Several witnesses reported road closures that night by authorities. And many saw and gathered radar returns for the aircraft above Pentyrch in the days leading up to the event. You have a lot of people who can verify what happened, say they saw, they experienced, radar, seismograph, something happened.
Yeah, and a lot of very similar stories. So, Bill, is it time for headlines?
I found a headline that I latched onto for, I'll get into it as I go through my headline. This is from the dailypost.co.uk, dated March 24th, 2025, by Stephanie Kuldrick and Steve Bagnall. The day Welsh actor Michael Sheen saw UFOs in Wales.
Michael Sheen.
I love Michael Sheen. I don't know if you're familiar. He was in the Twilight movies. I think he was in those movies with Kate Beckinsale where she killed vampires and werewolves.
Oh, yeah. Now, is he related to the Charlie Sheen?
No, he's
a different
he's
Sheen.
English.
Okay.
Have you seen Good Omens?
Yeah, I saw part of that, yes.
He's Aziraphale, the angel.
Okay.
So I think he's a great, cool actor. He's very funny. If you watch any of the stuff on YouTube with him, especially the stuff he does with David Tennant, they're hilarious. A little aside, there's a lovely video where they did a series of videos during COVID, and they decided they were going to do some art one morning, and then they would get online and show each other their art. And they're like, okay, so David, let's see what you've done. And he holds up like this line drawing of a pineapple that's got some shading on it, maybe. And he's just like, well, I drew a pineapple this morning. Michael Sheen pulls out a portrait of like the coast, fully painted, just this. And he's like, what do you think? And David Tennant, I love David Tennant too. He's great. But he's just like, you drew that this morning. And he's like, yeah, I painted this morning. Yeah, full of, he's like, it's hilarious. I guess they're really good friends in real life. They're very, very funny. But Michael Sheen is just delightful. I think he's a great actor. But anyway, in his words, I just stood there transfixed and I watched them come all out over the ocean and then they stopped. So Michael Sheen opened up about some strange encounters in his hometown, revealing that he believes he witnessed UFOs when he was younger. And he discussed his eerie experiences on the podcast Scarred for Life with hosts Andy Bush and Dave Lawrence. Now, he's originally from Port Talbot, which we talked about Port Talbot in the story there. They were involved in the incidents of that night. But he shared an anecdote from his past, citing a report from his then next-door neighbor, who was reportedly known for her sensible nature. He described how she told his parents that she had seen UFOs. And then Michael said he himself saw something, and he told a story when he was 12 years old, and he was coming home from school. And this is his story here in his words. I must have been about 12. I was coming home from school. As I was about to turn to go up the drive to my house, to my right, I saw the edge of the mountain. And just as I turned, I saw something come along the edge of the mountain, off in the distance. So I stopped, and then this light came out, and then 2 lights behind it, and then 3 lights behind it. A sort of phalanx of lights coming from behind the mountain and floating out over the sea. And as I'm standing there, I'm thinking, I think those are UFOs. I'm fairly certain those are UFOs. I thought I have to go into the house and tell my family that there are UFOs out there, but I knew that if I went in, they might disappear, so I just stood there transfixed, and I watched them come all out over the ocean, and then they stopped, and then they all disappeared. Now, he went on to explain that years later, his dad also believed that he had spotted UFOs in Port Talbot, and that he had heard other people have spotted things in Port Talbot. Apparently, the region is pretty common
Kind of
to
a
see
hot
stuff.
spot, yeah.
So when asked about whether he believed in the supernatural or not, Michael said, "What I believe is that we have no idea what's going on. Everything that we understand is a working hypothesis, isn't it? And we're able to understand the world and process everything and move forward because we've got something that basically works. But the idea that it doesn't have gaping holes in it seems ridiculous, so I'm very open to it."
Amen to that. Well said.
Yeah.
Well, for my headline, again, I will stress, I think this is a phenomenal example of a possible UAP, the unidentified aerial phenomenon, or possibly just a good old UFO, as I grew up used to call them. So I decided for my headline just to see what the area known for this phenomenal example that we had in 2016 might have going on in 2025 this year. So I thought, well, surely there may be something similar. And to your point, yeah, I found all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Within a few moments, I went over and did the old Google search and popped it up. And here is exactly verbatim what popped up. And I'm not going to spoil it for you. Or I guess I am going to spoil it for you. It's still happening. It's already been spoiled. Even December of 2025. But it says, in 2025, UAP reports in Wales continue with, and I'll probably butcher this, Dyfed Powys Police, I guess that's a police department over there, handling FOI requests, while news highlights of a Chinese rocket misidentified as a UFO in December, again, this is 2025, and military drills causing speculation earlier in the year, alongside ongoing interest in famous Welsh UFO cases like Broadhaven, suggesting consistent public intrigue and official documentation of unexplained aerial phenomenon in the region. Key incidents and trends in Wales of 2025. Police records. Again, I mentioned the police. Police have received freedom of information requests regarding UFO alien sightings, indicating that there is ongoing official recordings, though sometimes leading to cost-based refusals, saying that we don't have the manpower to go look up all those files right now, but, rest assured, your call's important. Please stay on the line, kind of some of that crap. But often never supplying any data back whatsoever. We also have misidentified sightings. A significant event in December 2025 involved a Chinese Zhuk 3 rocket test flight being mistaken for a UFO by public across Britain, including potentially there in Wales. Then we have, again, known continued military activity. Early in 2025, U.S. Air Force F-35 training exercises in West Wales caused confusion and social media buzz, with many residents mistaking them for UFOs. Then we have continued paranormal interest. Documentaries and social media continue to explore historically the Welsh UFO hotspots like Broadhaven. The Dyfed Triangle was another story that popped up, keeping that topic well alive in the public eye for 2025.
So we talk about UFO stuff a lot, the alien activity and whatnot. I think when we talk about UFOs, we always assume that it's a non-human intelligence, NHI. Another one of those abbreviations that's crept into the common deal. You say UAP, we still say UFO.
It's still UFO.
I'm old-fashioned.
Yeah.
What is it that you find fascinating about the UFOs and the UFO phenomenon? Why is it something that you keep going back to, that we keep going back to? What grabs you and really, like, what's your interest in it?
Well, first off, let me say, you've picked on me before. I have a fascination with giants, and that's one of my I love to do research. And you asked me
I want to
once,
see where this path takes you. I'm not sure how these are.
This is related. And my answer to that question on another podcast, why are you so fascinated about giants? Why won't you let it go? And I told you something to the effect of, if you are a non-believer in this realm of paranormal, unexplained, to me, a giant would be the logical first step. We have humans, and it's just a big human, so that's why I'm intrigued with that. Well, the answer is almost the same with UFOs. The universe, the cosmos, is so vast, and I think it is the most foolish thing in the world for any of us little humans to think none of that has any purpose whatsoever, and everything evolves and rotates around just us, just here. That is the most self-centered human characteristic we could ever do.
I was going to say, I think it would be the height of arrogance to believe we're the only ones out there.
So that's why I'm intrigued with UFOs, as I think that's probably one of the next most logical steps, but it is so hard. That is such a huge step from a giant that a lot of people just, they want to close it down. They don't want to have open ears or open minds about it. But I mean, seriously, why have all that space out there if there's nothing there for it? So
I'm kind of the same opinion in that, like, one, I think, again, like I said, it would be the height of arrogance to think we're the only intelligent life in the universe, as vast as the universe is. As a matter of fact, when I was younger and I used to challenge certain ways of thinking, I knew a guy who was very religious, and we were having a conversation one day, and I just, what do you think about aliens? Because I figured I knew the answer.
You can lose friends real quick with
and
that
he was like,
topic.
He was like, well, even in the Bible, it says that God created other souls than these.
Yes.
He goes, I 100% believe that there's life on other planets. There has to be.
Open-minded.
But also the fact that it's one of the most well-documented unexplained phenomenon. The government is 100% involved. As a matter of fact, if you follow the news on these sorts of things, Vegas odds makers are saying that we could expect disclosure in the next year.
Yep.
Like full on, we have access to this technology. We don't know where it's from.
I firmly believe we are being trained right now by our government, by the powers that be, whoever that might be, filtering stuff down to us to the fact where, let's say 20 years ago, if somebody would have said close encounters of the third kind may actually happen tomorrow, most people would have laughed. Today, because of all the Tic-Tac videos and unidentified UAPs and new terminology and new science and all this, it would be a little easier to swallow that pill if something massive did happen.
I do kind of hope, I'm sure you've seen the movie Mars Attacks.
Mm-hmm.
I will react just like that old lady and, they blew up Congress. I can only hope that they come here with the idea of, look, you guys are screwed up. We're going to help you get back on track because God help us, we are a mess.
Well, my question, I know I'm kind of also known as the historian. I want to believe, as Fox Mulder used to say, you're more the monster guy.
I do like monsters.
But I know we both kind of share the love of a good UFO story. This is absolutely one of the ones I feel go to the top of the class with. Even though it was only a 3-day event, it is very well documented.
Well, again, I didn't know about it until you mentioned it, and now I would put it up there with Roswell for me. Roswell, Rendlesham Forest.
Thank you. Yes.
That's a good story. It's a good story.
So my question is for you, what is one of your favorite similar stories, maybe we've covered it, maybe we haven't, that struck a chord with you the same way this struck a chord with me?
Elaborate a little bit. What do you?
Maybe it's Roswell. Maybe give me another UFO event that in your mind has just as much clout, just as much power, believability, or whatever.
Oh, it's absolutely Roswell, in the fact that so much happened immediately following Roswell that was like, oh, we've captured a flying disc, and then no, wait a minute, it's a weather balloon.
It's a weather balloon.
I absolutely believe that I think the military jumped out and started talking about what happened, and then realized we can't let on that we did this. And just the fact that, for me, Roswell kind of hits a personal note when, some of the bodies were taken, the bodies in the wreckage were taken to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. I've been to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. They have an amazing Air Force flight museum there with
Did they show you the grays?
No. There's a lot of aircraft there, and you go to the museum, and the museum's actually in 2 sections. So you go to the museum, and there's a big museum building, and it's got like a lot of history stuff, a lot of artifacts. And then you take a bus to a hangar, and that's where they actually have like the aircraft.
Oh, wow.
And they have all these historical aircraft there. There's an old World War II bomber that we had to get our pictures taken with when we were young scamps named the Strawberry Bitch, just so we could have that in the background of the picture. Of course, she's got the pinup paint on the side, and it's a redhead
classic
gal.
Pinup girl.
But when you drive by, I like to think that you drive by Hangar 13, which is where
All
those
that
bodies
history.
and stuff are at. But again, it's a military base. So even when the bus goes onto the base, like you go to the museum and you tour the museum, and then you get on the bus, and the bus goes to a gate, and they're stopped by security, and security checks things out and then authorizes them, and you go straight to the hangar, and it's like fenced off. You go into the hangar, like they don't want you wandering around,
Yeah.
And again, I'm assuming it's just for safety's sake, and it's a military base, and I don't want people just snooping.
They don't want you to see the grays in the back office
Yeah,
working.
there's that part of me that thinks they don't want you to see the aliens. So
I think it would be so cool if the powers that be have these museums, and maybe they have another museum of this is what you might expect to see here. And it'd be like Hollywood alien castings and UFOs and parts and pieces. And maybe slip in some real
like
stuff.
that's a real
just
that's
to
a
hide
real
it
body
in
there.
plain sight in front of
That would
people.
be amazing, actually.
Well, that's all we've got for tonight for you, folks.
You didn't answer your question.
Well, I actually did. I said this one
Oh,
is
okay,
my
okay.
story.
Okay. All
Don't
right.
give me one that's
That's kind of a.
I kind of
gimme.
yeah.
Okay.
Well, that's about all we've got to share with you on this episode on the Pentyrch UFO. And yes, we're going to call it a UFO incident. We hope that you've enjoyed, and if you stayed with us up to this point, we've got some open-minded listeners out there, which is our perfect crew. So thanks so much for listening. We appreciate each and every one of you.
Hey, real quick call to action. I think Eric would agree. We'd like to grow this. Nightmares on the Lost Highway.
Absolutely.
If you could, if you're listening on Apple, if you would go and give us a review and rate us. If you have some feedback, that's fine too. Whatever platform you're listening, follow us, rate us, give us some reviews. That helps get some recognition and gets our name out there.
We do have a Facebook page, Nightmares on the Lost Highway. You can easily find us if you want to communicate with us. If you want to share some possibilities for future podcasts with us, reach out. We want to talk with you guys.
I want to take a time to thank the people that helped bring this all together. Alex Tudor, you can almost call him our producer at this point. Sarah Tudor, who also helps with some of the technical stuff. I want to take a moment to extend thanks to Eric for letting us use his space to record in, kind of our makeshift studio.
I, in turn, would like to thank Bill for, one, putting up with me and using this camaraderie to do something we both very much love and enjoy doing, and thank Bill's family for allowing him to spend all the time to work and clean up our recordings and present them in what you hear in the final terms, the final edition, if you will.
And I'd like to thank all of you for continuing to listen. I know we've got some loyal followers out there. We do this as a labor of love, but we're happy that there are people that enjoy it hopefully as much as we do.
Thank you very much.